My name's Paul Kelly. I am a community-led housing advisor and CCH associate working on the 4 million homes programme. And I have been since April running some face-to-face sessions here in Merseyside, in Liverpool. And I'm really excited actually being part of this program. I think I talk about it a lot. This program's really building momentum and really collecting people and gathering people together, and it feels really exciting in this current climate to have this program in existence. We've got two great speakers who are going to talk about real practical direct experience, both from a tenant's point of view and from a housing association point of view. And I think it'll be really great to hear what they have to say. So Steve Martin is the Customer Scrutiny Officer at Midland Heart, and they've been really recognised for their work around energy efficiency and the impact it has made on the lives of residents. I think that's something that in one of the sessions we did recently came up around landlords doing improvements, but they have to benefit the tenant that's living in the property. And I think we had a really great debate about that actually at last session, completely randomly. And it was a real eye-opener in terms of it's only worth doing these things if it really has an impact on the people living in the property. So over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for that lovely introduction. So yeah, guys. So my name's Steve Martin. As I say, I am a customer scrutiny officer with Midland Heart. So many of you that will be involved in your tenant programs in your own housing associations will have a similar program. I am here today to talk about what we've done as part of our retrofit program. We've just finished our first wave of actually installing energy efficient measures into our tenants' homes, and talk to you a bit about what we do in terms of engagement, making sure it works for the tenants and all of those fun things. So yeah, Helen, if you want to pop the presentation up, that'd be awesome. Lovely. So many of you will be aware, I'm sure, of Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, SHDF. We've also got a couple of other initiatives that we take part in, and I'll hopefully I will run you through those in this presentation. Lovely. So I think yeah, that's it. That's lovely. Thank you. So I think the thing that we're all here and interested in is how does the tenant voice actually influence what we do? So we carry out an annual rent consultation survey where we actually ask our tenants, are they struggling to pay their bills? What's the things they're most concerned about? We run a lot of other satisfaction surveys as well. And in that, of course, in the last sort of two surveys, tenants have told us that paying their energy bills is one of the biggest concerns. I'm sure we can all, relate to that. And of course, along with that, with rising costs, our tenants want to see an improvement in the quality of their home. So as Paul sort of so eloquently put it, then it's about making sure that these things are, these things that we're doing are improving the lives of our tenants, not just from an energy perspective, but in general anyway. 62% of our tenants support our approach to providing energy efficient homes. So I know that seems a bit, but it's nice that we do have that, that support from our tenants that this is the right thing to do. We use regular tenant contact and perception surveys to improve the service that we offer. So yeah, it's great that we're doing it, but how can we improve it? How can we make it better? How can we improve how we're speaking to our tenants, how we're keeping them informed of this? And how can we train them afterwards? How can we inform them afterwards of how to use the nice shiny new solar panels we put on their roof, or the solar thermal hot water we've just installed in their property? To do that, we take complaints, compliments, comments, and we run focus groups on this as well. So not just the bad, but the good also. If we find pockets of good practice, we take that. And then, of course, we try and learn from our mistakes as well. And then we also have our involved tenant groups. We have one called My Impact, which oversees everything that we do and holds us to account. They are heavily involved in making sure that, we are doing what we're saying we're going to for want of a better phrase. Sorry, there is a question in the chat. How do we contact our tenants on a regular basis? Thank you, Colin. So yeah, so as I say, we do have our surveys and everything that we do. I will come on to a bit more what we do in terms of SHDF specifically in a moment, if that's okay. It is a bit later on in the chat, but I'm quite happy to answer any questions afterwards about it. So how we're improving our tenants' homes. So we're taking a 5 sort of pronged approach to it, as you can see here. So one of the things we're doing now is we're upgrading things as they reach the end of their life. So if someone's got double glazing windows, we're looking at putting triple glazing in. If the heating system's coming to the end of its life, can we put a new energy efficient boiler in, or are we going to look at what's going on now with the government, where they're saying, well, we don't want boilers in new homes from 2030, although I think they've now changed that. And instead, can we go down the route of putting solar panels on the roof and putting in electric heating and sun amps and all of those fun things? We are using the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund to target our homes that have an EPC rating of D and below. That is where we are at the moment in terms of we've just completed wave 1 and we're moving on to wave 2 and tackling our worst performing homes energy wise first. We're building new energy efficient homes through our Project 80 project, which has received quite a lot of attention because we've built these homes that already come with solar panels on the roof, have the energy efficient water and all of that sort of thing, insulation being made in a green way as well. So not just from an energy efficiency point of view, but from a sustainability also. And we have a project called Demand Side Response, or DSR for short. If anyone's ever not heard of that, it's a project we've done in conjunction with Centrica, where we've actually got people's storage heaters hooked up to the internet, and what it does is it monitors energy draw from them when they're turned on and all of that sort of thing, so that we can help Centrica and the grid to actually plan for making sure that we've got enough energy to actually power all of these storage heats and things, which it looks like the way it's going. Out of that, we've actually, as Centrica have actually launched a new tariff that actually works specifically with this type of heating, so where it'll turn it on and off, to make sure we've actually got enough draw from the grid, so that not everyone's storage heaters are coming on at 2 a.m. They're staggered throughout the night, so it runs efficiently. And we use sort of tenant feedback as well. Again, if tenants are saying, well, we want this, we want that, we'll look into it and see if it's something we can do. If it is, let's go, and it's going to benefit tenants, then let's go with it. And I think that's it sort of brings on to the question of how do we ensure we're helping as many tenants as we can. So it's about making sure that we do get as many tenants as we can. We know that fuel poverty is a thing. We would know that there are a lot of tenants suffering out there. So how do we spend all of this money that we have in a way that helps as many people as we can, not just the few? Have the next slide, please. Thank you. So we have a case study that we've done, which takes into account one of our typical homes. So in terms of this, this property that we're looking at here, it represents about 10% of the homes that we rent out to our tenants, and they're usually rated at an EPC, C, D or E. A C if we've actually done something to them in terms of energy efficiency in recent times, or a D or an E if not. So 10 properties that we've looked at in this particular case study have a Z, and 0 properties in the case study are above this at the moment. The type of property we could achieve an energy performance certificate of an A if we use, depending on the sort of the measures that we use. So this is your typical 2-bed mid-terrace from the 1900s. Have the next slide, please, Hannah. Thank you. So what do we do when we're looking at these homes? So when we're doing things like energy efficiency, we don't just want to look at making the home energy efficient. As you can appreciate, where we've got a lot of terrace homes and stuff, they have a lot of character about them. And we, so we don't want to fundamentally change the way that we're looking at people's home, the look of people's homes. It's about doing things that make sure, that make sure we're still keeping the character of the street, let's say. We look at triple glazing, whether that's a thing. I don't know if anyone's had triple glazing, but it does mean that that window openings and things like that have to be changed and all of that sort of jazz. We take into account roof ventilation and access as well. Of course, we all know damp and mold relies on heating your home, but also adequately venting it as well. Is underfloor insulation an option? Well, isn't that the $1 million question? A lot of the homes that we have, there are a lot that do have basements, so it does allow us the facility to do underfloor insulation. Some of them don't. Some are built on concrete block. And again, I'll come on to the reasons why we look at all this in a moment. What heating mix you need. So we also know there are question marks around gas central heating and COPD. There are also question marks around electric heating and COPD, depending on who you speak to. And again, is that the most efficient way? Is it the cheapest way? Is it the best way? But then we also look at, does the home need a new roof? So we were talking earlier about replacing things as they go. So when your home needs a new roof, is it wise at that point to say, well, okay, we're going to take the roof off anyway. Why don't we install solar panels into the roof rather than installing them on top of the roof afterwards? So there's a lot of different things that we take into account there. And one of the things at the top of that list, which we are very mindful of taking into account, is how much disruption does this cause to a tenant when they're living in the home and having all of this work done. Can I have the next slide, please, Helen? Thank you. So, and this is why we look at the approach. So we know we've got to do this. There's lots of reasons why we should, not just because the government tell us we have to. And we've looked at doing a bit at a time or doing everything all at once. And of course, there's pros and cons to both, which I'm sure you can read there on your screen. I'm not going to go through them all, but do it all at once. It's done in once, all at once, bam, done. All the measures are there, done. But that can be super disruptive. If you're doing internal wall insulation, for instance, you're ripping everyone's plaster off and going back to brick. And it's just, it's. And would I want to live in a home while that's happening? Well, possibly not. So, we do take the tenants' views into account with that. And also it's things like, are they vulnerable? Do they have, do they get anxious and all of that sort of thing? Doing a bit of a time. Yeah, it's a familiar process, just like what you do in your own home. You might do the painting one week in your living room, then the next week you might do the walls, then the next week you might do the skirting. It's steady and predictable. But then that means then you might have to book extra time off work to have it happen. And then do we not take the whole house into account? So if you're doing insulation at one point, but then you haven't done the venting, have you took the venting into account? And then if you haven't, does that then cause more problems? So there's pros and cons for each. We have the next slide, please, Anne. Thank you. So this is our sort of what we're looking to do. So by the time 2030 comes, we want all of our homes to be looking at a C or a B. We don't want any D-rated homes left in that we can rent out by this time. We've actually set a target to have it done by 2025, which, ambitious as it is achievable. Then on the government timeline, typical home 2035 to 2040, again, we're going a bit higher, C, B, or even A rated. And then by 2050, that's when we all need to be at net zero as it stands at the moment. With those measures, with the homes, with pretty much with all homes where we can, having the measures in the boxes. And as you can see, it's quite a wide range of things that we can do. Have the next slide, please. Thank you. So, how are we going to achieve it? So, all the homes below the D rating are being treated as a priority, as that's where fuel poverty is going to hit the most. You know, are we looking at external wall insulation? Well, yes, we are, but it's extremely expensive per home. And I suppose that then comes back to the argument of, well, for putting external insulation on one home, we could probably put solar panels on 3 homes. So are we helping? Are we doing more and helping better? Are we doing, are we doing more by and helping more people by doing that? Well, yes, we are. So, but again, it's a work in progress, and we sort of change our approach depending on what we need to do. Again, windows reaching the end of the life. Let's get some triple glazing in there. Roof reached the end of its life, and put a new one on with solar panels. Upgrade the loft insulation as we go, and installing floor insulation when a property comes void. So again, if a property becomes void and it's at an EPC level that's not acceptable, then that's the perfect opportunity to go absolutely ham on that property and do everything we need to in one go. So then when a new tenant comes in, they're moving into a nice, thermally warm, energy efficient home. I've noticed there's some questions in the chat. I will come back to them at the end, I promise you. Okay, next. Thank you very much. So a bit about SHDF. I'm pretty sure that you guys all know all about this, and probably just as much as I do. So yeah, it is aimed at improving the energy efficiency at home with a package of works done all at once. We've taken the approach of doing loft insulation, triple glazed windows and doors where applicable, solar panels on the roof, boiler replacements, and mechanical ventilation such as extractor fans and things like that. We have concentrated on our EPC bands E to D. If you guys know your EPCs, you'll know that those are the worst performing homes, and we have concentrated on the E's first, and we will concentrate on those to get those done. That's where I come in as a customer scrutiny officer as well, because I actually end up going out and speaking to a lot of these tenants and finding out what we can do to help them. Tenants are communicated with at every stage of the project. So it started off with me writing out a letter saying your home has been picked for this. This is what it's going to do. We write out to them to say when a surveyor's come in, what that means for the tenant. We then write out to them when the works are going to start and what that means to the tenant, because in the cases where we're fitting triple glazing, loft insulation, solar panels and things like that, the tenants aren't decanted unless there is a specific need to do that. Where the works would be more intrusive, then we would look to do that on void, or indeed if we had to do it before that, we would investigate whether to decant. But as one of the comments has already said, budget wise, it would cost a fortune, yes, but in terms of, it's more to do with how much that affects a tenant, because you're asking them to potentially go and live in another property where they might not have their support circle in place. They might not know the area very well. The kids might go to school 3 or 4 miles away. They might not have a car. There's more. It's with this and with tenant involvement, it's more than just how much it costs. You also have the social element to it as well. We are looking at wave 2. So we have completed our wave 1 properties. That was around about 168. So we're moving on to the next lot, which is about 412. Again, we're looking at measures that will more than likely include cavity wall insulation, solar PV with a solar diverter to a hot water cylinder, cylinder jackets, cylinder replacements, heater replacements where necessary, bulbs. And we're going to use whatever feedback we've had from wave 1 to help shape wave 2. Cool. So a bit more about Project 80. So we built 12 homes, and we used different and 3 different solutions were successfully delivered. We adapted conventional house types with masonry construction. We designed 80 to 90% reduction of carbon, into there. There's heat pumps in there. There's all sorts in there. They easily deliver over 20 degrees. The heat pumps do, even when temperatures are outside of -7. But again, that's about teaching our tenants how to use the technology that's in there so they can get the most out of it. We left the tenants in there for a year, and then asked them how they were getting on, which raised some really good results. And the tenants were delighted with the level of thermal comfort in their homes. And there was 7 sector industry awards on that. Yeah, let's move on. Okay, lovely. And demand side response I've been into. So we've tied that in 8 retirement living schemes covering about 200 odd heaters. New smart storage heater technology automatically staggers the drawdown of energy to balance power networks. Tenants, it doesn't affect tenants. They use their heaters in the normal way that they normally would, but it helps to reduce costs. It has led to a new tariff being launched by British Gas, and we've received, I think it's more like 3 or 4 actually major awards now, to be fair, for this. So some really good work, and our tenants again were engaged about this, told at every step of the way what's going to happen, and weren't left in the dark about anything. That project is still ongoing, and they are still being contacted. Next one, please. Thank you. Lovely. So benefits does all this have? So better energy consumption. I would like to say lower bills, but unfortunately we all know with the way costs are going, I can't promise anybody that, but better energy consumption when the costs hopefully go down a bit will lead to better energy bills. We're helping to counter fuel poverty, digital exclusion as well. And I've put fuel poverty twice, but yeah, digital exclusion as well. More people have got more money in the pocket. Hopefully they can get themselves online and do other things like that. Improve thermal warmth, what we all want. Prevention of damp and mould, which, as we know, with our Webb's Law coming in, is going to, again, shake up the way that housing associations, look after their tenants. We do measure it as well via our tenant surveys. We've already seen improved tenant satisfaction in the homes where this has happened. And most importantly, a higher quality of homes for our tenants. We know how much, things cost at the moment. We want our tenants to feel like they're receiving value for money. So, why not? We have to give tenants a better quality of home to live in. Have the next slide, please. Where am I done? No. So in practice, so the way this works is that we gain access to our tenants' homes. So we'll write to them, they'll let us in. We'll talk to them about sort of what their concerns are, what their needs are, anything like that. We offer them the support through the process. They'll usually have my number or the contract manager's number or somebody's direct mobile phone number, and they can phone us whenever they want and talk about what's going on, if the contracts haven't turned up, if they've got concerns about the work, or if they just want to have a chat about the things that are going on. Rectification and identification and rectification of other issues. Of course, if a home hasn't been heated properly, that can lead to damp and mould. We look at things like if there's any other needs in the home, if tenants are struggling, if there's any safeguarding issues, if there's anything we need to get tenant service involved to support people with, all of those sorts of things. And then installation of new measures and ongoing support. So we will, in fact, install these services. But as I say, we won't leave our tenants in the dark. We will then look to educate on how to use them, but also we follow up. So I'm going to be doing surveys every 3, 6 and 12 months until they've been in for a year to see how it's affected tenants' bills, their thermal comfort, how they feel about their home, and all of that sort of thing. And the next slide, please. I think we're battering through nicely. Yeah. So, what our tenants have said. So, these are actual genuine quotes from our tenants that we've already had feedback on from our independent survey. We have an independent company that does some of our surveys for us. Your association might do the same. This is what our tenants have told the independent people, not what they've told us. So, you know, there's some really encouraging things on there. Yes, there's some bad stuff on there that we've seen as well, and we'll look to address that. But we're, you know, we like to celebrate the wins as well, and especially with the project that, you know, as you all know, was in its infancy 2 years ago.
Running costs of new appliances. So Chris Hesketh sort of mentioned this idea of, have you done any work about sort of how people are using their properties and being able to compare annual existing customer energy bills?
Yeah. So as part of the retrofit survey that we send out at the very start of the works, what we do is a brilliant question. What we do is we actually ask, the first thing we ask is what on your last energy bill, what was your kilowatt hours use? What was your spend? And that's for gas and electric. So that's the pre-work survey. So what we then do is 3 months after they've had the measures installed, we go back to them and we say, right, you told us your energy usage was this 3 months ago. What is it now? And then we do the same on 6 months. We do the same on 12 months. Because that way then we can go back to our board of directors and we can go back to our involved tenants and we can go back to everyone and say, look, this approach is the right approach because look at the way that energy consumption has reduced. We can also use that to say, well, actually, this hasn't had the effect that we thought it would. Do we need to change the approach? So to answer your question, yes, we do. It is entirely up to the tenant whether they supply that information to us. But it gives us that insight, and it's not just people saying I've saved a third. We've then got quantifiable evidence that people are saving money, and it gives our tenants and our board that reassurance.
Do you think EPCs are an effective, acceptable method for measuring energy efficiency in homes?
Right. So it's a good one. And it's probably a bit above my level of expertise, if I'm honest. However, what I will say in terms of EPCs is that is what the government measure us upon, isn't it? That's what when everybody looks to buy a home or rent a home, that is what everybody looks at. That's why I said in my presentation about the right measures in the right way. So you can do all of the measures that an EPC says, but it doesn't add up to a warm, energy efficient home that then you can live in and not get damp and mold and all those fun things in. So it's what we do is we use it as a baseline to say, well, we know this home is energy efficient. What are the best ways we can use to go into said home and then improve the energy efficiency for that tenant. And again, we do take their feedback and we look at, we've looked at different combinations of what we've used as well to try and find the best one. But there isn't a one size fits all approach to it. Every home gets individually surveyed. Every home has its own package of measures.
Okay. Another question from Sue.
Yeah.
Do you factor in at all tenants who might be experiencing fuel poverty in terms of who you're prioritising? Does that factor in at all?
It does to a degree, yes. What we've found is that most of our tenants that are suffering fuel poverty and things like that are in our worst performing homes because they're having to put so much money into actually turning the heating on. They then don't bother. So then it then causes the more problem of, well, they're not in an energy efficient home, which means that it's going to be losing heat left, right and centre. So therefore that means, they're in trouble. We do have tenancy services as well, and we do have a money advice line. So if anyone is identified as having fuel poverty issues, they can ring us and discuss that with us, and then we look at measures. You know, if they identify themselves to us and they are in a home that does qualify for SHDF or any of that sort of thing, we will take that into account and you know, if it try and get them into a program, or indeed, you know, assist them in terms of how to use their heaters. I'll go out and talk to people and show them how to use their heaters and things like that if they're in a home where we can't do anything. So we do have other ways of helping people that are suffering fuel poverty, yes.
Okay. And then another couple of quick ones.
Yep.
So what sort of budget are you talking to about properties, and are there some that just wouldn't be viable? Is that
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there are some that potentially won't be viable. What that means, I don't know. But I think you'd have to expect that with any property. So if you're looking at, you know, if your home is listed, for instance, that means you can't put triple glazing in. If you know you can't do external wall insulation. There are homes out there like it. In terms of how much we spend the property, couldn't tell you. I could, but I'm not allowed. But it's I will say it's five figures and it's more than £10,000 usually.
Yeah.
Per home.
Alice has asked a lot of questions about tower blocks and when you've
Yeah.
got multiple owner occupiers. Do you have any
Yeah.
experience of that?
In terms of blocks of flats, no, we've not sort of approached that yet. But usually with blocks of flats, as you know, your EPC covers your internal flat itself. We did do a big project actually, where we did 60 properties, and they were broken into blocks of 4 flats, and it was one below, one above. So it was like, and they were blocks. We have put solar panels in those properties, new energy efficient gas boilers. Did all the engagement for that. So it is happening in those. In terms of high rises, we don't have that many ourselves anyway as an association. In terms of properties where there are, like, they're broken into maybe 2 or 3 flats, we are looking at those as well under wave 2, because that's a bit more fluid than wave 1 was. And again, we'll look at those in a similar way. Can we get solar panels on the roof and divert, you know, down? And all of that sort of thing. So it really just depends on what your association's sort of appetite is towards it, and what the buildings allow you to do as well.
Okay.
Paul, can I just come in on that one?
Yep.
I was talking to a landlord a few months ago, and it was a similar situation. They owned properties in a terrace. I'm not sure how many homes were actually in the terrace. They owned the whole row apart from one property,
Yeah.
which was owned by a private landlord. They went to the private landlord and said, look, we're going to retrofit all our properties in this terrace. If you want to jump on our tailcoat, you know, we can get all the work done at the same time. That landlord turned around and said, no. If you're going to do yours, you can do mine free. So the landlord said, no, we're not going to do that. If you want yours done, you've got to pay for it. They done all the work. That private landlord then went to his solicitor and tried to sue the housing association because he said his property, which was in the middle of the terrace, looked like a bad tooth on a denture. And he lost. He didn't get it done. The story behind that, the thing behind it is landlords should work together. When you've got a tower block, the housing association is only responsible for their properties. They should negotiate with the other owners, whether they're privately owned, whether they're private renters or whatever. Whoever owns the properties, they should collaborate together.
Because the rules are different, aren't they, at the moment for private landlords? And until they're on an even keel, I believe that's going to be a battle that we're going to face. Because as we all know, you know, just because we don't own full streets of houses usually, you do get these pockets where people own this and people own that, and so it does bring a conundrum, but it's a good point. This is a very
Yeah.
good point.
Can I just say one thing about the EPCs? Again, I was at a meeting last week, and I was talking to somebody who's very, very experienced in the EPCs. And he said that EPCs really, as far as retrofit are concerned, are a waste of time.
I agree.
My personal view is that you can wrap a house up in a fur coat and make it nice and snug and warm, so it doesn't use much electric or energy to heat. You've restricted the airflow, the air loss, and everything else, and that will probably get an EPCA. But it's nothing at all to do with retrofit. Now, 2030 PAS 35, which is bringing all homes up to EPCC, and retrofit can be diametrically opposed to each other.
Midland Heart doing great stuff. Really like the kind of structured kind of approach that you're taking to this. And again, it's definitely something we need to learn about across the sector. So, Steve McKenzie, can I bring you in?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. I shall be talking from a tenant's point of view nationally, not from my landlord's point of view. So everything is my opinions. But I have got some good examples of customer engagement. Tenants should be involved from day one. Yorkshire Housing have a project which they just started doing the work on, and they started customer engagement 6 months ago. They sent letters out explaining that the houses were going to be retrofitted, explained what was going to be done, explained how it's going to be done, and they started, saying to the tenants, if you've got any questions, ask us. And it's been going on since then. Now, a lot of landlords around the country do their customer engagement differently. And I cannot believe how there are so many diverse ways that they do customer engagement. Some landlords, as I say, Yorkshire Housing, 6 months before the project starts. Other landlords, literally weeks before the work starts. Now, that doesn't give the customers enough time to ask the questions, to be happy, to be comforted, to be given the information they need for that work to be done. Now, like Steve said, and again, last year, I met a couple of other landlords. They spoke to their customers and they turned up with a couple of skips to empty lofts. If a shed needs moving, they'll move the shed, so they've got somewhere to fit the heat pump. If somebody needs the room decorating after the work's been done, they'll be given vouchers to get that done. New carpets or vouchers towards new carpets and things like that. Really, the decent landlords really go into what the customer actually needs and wants and work around the situation to make everybody happy. Now, not everybody's going to be happy. That's because sometimes if somebody is not shown, for argument's sake, how to use a heat pump properly, their energy use will shoot up. But that's not the fault of the retrofit. They've either been instructed wrongly or they haven't quite understood. And good customer engagement is dispelling the myths. I went up to a project last year. It hadn't started yet. I went up to an open day where the landlord had the manufacturer of the heat pump, the company that was going to install the heat pump, and the contractor there, as well as an underfloor insulation company. One lady was very worried about having a heat pump installed because she heard, I'm going to be facetious here, but she heard from a friend whose brother's, auntie's, fiance's, sister's dog had a heat pump installed, and their energy costs went through the roof. Now, this lady, because of a medical condition, her energy cost is about £90 a week. After talking to the heat pump manufacturer, she went away happy and can't wait to have the work done. Another lady was told that if she has a heat pump installed, when it's working during the winter, if her dog walked in front of it, it would freeze. Now, these are the stories that are going around. But the housing associations, the government, the housing sector, the manufacturers are not doing anything to counteract these stories and these things that people are actually believing. Now, that makes the landlord's situation 50% harder, because there isn't a lot of trust between landlords and tenants over what's happened over the last decades. So it's important for A, the tenants to ask questions, and B, for the landlords to listen and answer them honestly. No transparency. Full transparency. Don't hold back on anything. And the only way to do that is to actually involve the tenants and get the tenants that have had the work done, hopefully, to become ambassadors to other tenants. Not just concentrate on what's gone well, because with retrofit, there's going to be noise, there's going to be disruption, there's going to be dust, there's going to be possible decants. All these things should be discussed before the work gets done. Now, I don't know about Steve's association. What I personally would like to see is the landlords talking, not just the people that are going to have the work done, but to the wider community. Explain what the work is going to happen. Explain how it's going to go about. Explain the good bits as well as the bad bits, and let the community start talking. Because you get one person who has a bad experience, that's all anybody will remember. But if you can get the whole community involved right from day one, so if you've got a project of, say, 12 houses being done in a development where there are 50, talk to everybody, get them all involved. Couple of good bits of customer engagement. Last year, as I say, went to this project that's going to be done, and Yorkshire Housing spoke to the tenants, and afterwards Yorkshire Housing decided, because of the concerns of the tenants, they are going to put in storage batteries for the solar panels, so that it can store any energy that's generated by the solar panels. It will be there to be used outside of generating time for the solar panels. And that's free power for them. Then over a period of 2 or 3 weeks, it was made known that the area where the work's going to be done is right out in the sticks, very windy, and they suffer with regular blackouts, power outages. So again, Yorkshire Housing decided that they would fit storage batteries with what they call lands. Now, what a land does is it allows a storage battery to still use the power within it while there's a power cut. It doesn't need to be operational, from an energy use to actually allow that power to be used. There's another case. This is a bit of a unique situation, but there was one tenant who, him and his family have medical issues, and discovered that he was able to apply for funding from other charities and other funders. Contacted Yorkshire Housing for permission to have the work done. Yorkshire Housing got in touch with the other funders and the tenant and said, look, what do you need? What's going on? Went through everything. And this is outside of any social housing decarbonation fund money. They got together, and that customer is having a real full retrofit. He's having a room in roof insulation, solar panels, EV, heat pump, the lot. He's having more than a standard retrofit would need. And that is being done with funding from these other grant providers plus Yorkshire Housing. Yorkshire Housing are putting in over 25%. Again, listening to the customer, finding out what the customer needs, and working with the customer to get that work done. These are the sort of customer engagement that we need to expect people of a certain age to empty their own roofs. There's a health and safety aspect to it, and everything else. It's down to landlords to help the customers on that journey. Having said that, it's also down to the customers to help the landlord in that journey. If you've got any questions, if you hear these god-awful myths around retrofit, please ask the questions. And if necessary, go and talk to somebody who's had the work done and find out. Get the real aspect to it. Get the truth about the noise, disruption, everything else. One of the hardest parts of the journey that I'm finding is getting customers involved. It's almost as if we've got till 2050, so that's another 26 years. It's almost as if everybody's saying, well, it's 26 years, why do I need to get involved now? Well, we've got 24 million homes to retrofit, and yours is one of them. And housing associations have been brought to the fore by the government offering them the money to get the work done. So if you like, guinea pigs, but it's a learning curve for everyone. But we've got the opportunity now to get our properties retrofitted, so we've got healthy, warm, safe, energy efficient homes to live in before anybody else in the country. So I implore everybody, get onto your landlords, get a retrofit group going, get talking to your landlords, get talking to your neighbours, your friends, whatever. And that is going to be that is the only way to speed up the process. For me, everything is too slow at the moment.
Okay, Steve, thank you very much. Very inspiring talk from the tenant's point of view. We're going to have Anna Spencer, who is the Housing Delivery Manager for the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority. And in that role, Anna has worked with a consortium of registered providers across Merseyside, looking at a programme of retrofit and energy efficiency works as part of the government's social housing decarbonisation fund, the first wave of funding. Really chuffed to have Anna Spencer here from Liverpool City Region Combined Authority. And I'll hand over to you, Anna.
Thanks, Paul. You've really bigged me up, so the pressure's on to make this interesting, I hope. Thanks, Helen's just going to whiz us back to the first page here. So as Paul said, I work at the Combined Authority, and I also wear a second hat, which is as a board member for CCH. So it's been, and I've only done that for probably 6 months or so. And it's been really interesting for me to wear the two hats and to see those different contexts of something that's of a big scale, as I can talk about here through SHDF, but also to try and understand the position of people who might be coming from smaller housing associations or community groups, cooperatives who might want to do this on a smaller scale. So Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund is a huge pot of money that the Conservatives have put together to be spent over a 10-year period. And the first wave of this came out in 2022. So it's to improve the energy efficiency, as it says, of homes to energy performance certificate, EPC Band C. So straight away, the eligibility for this fund was for properties owned by social housing providers that had a lower than C EPC. And you would get you'd be eligible for more funding the worse your property was. The general pitch was if it was an EPC D, you could get up to £10,000 to improve that property. And if it was lower than that, you could get just a little bit more. I think that's it for this slide. Thanks. On we go. Thanks, Helen. So in the Liverpool City region, we had a consortium. So we had we put together a bid to central government made up of 8 different housing providers in our area. They all put together their own bids, and it totaled an ask there of just over £11 million in grants. And the housing associations didn't just receive free works to their properties, they had to co-fund at least half the cost. So as things evolved, a lot of costs increased. And one very big issue that we talked to central government a lot about was the fact that when you have a scheme like this that has a specific time frame to be delivered in, of course you're going to create a huge amount of demand that has to be delivered in a very specific time frame. And so you increase in whatever region you're in or however you might access some funding, you're creating a lot of demand that has to be responded to, and the supply of the goods and services, and importantly the skills, have to be able to respond to that in the time frame that you've got available. I'll touch a bit more on that further on. So for our just over £11 million of grant, we delivered just over 1,200 improved properties. And of those 1,200, it just says down there at the bottom, just slightly less than that were EPCs D to G, improved up to a C or better. And the difference there is just because we ended up you're allowed to have a discrete amount that were EPCCs to begin with, but it was only a very few that you could do that with. So these are our local authorities in the Liverpool City region. And unfortunately, this time we didn't deliver anything in St Helens, which is something we're going to rectify in our next wave of social housing decarbonisation. Helen, on we go, please. Then the next slide was only to show that there were a number of RPs in each of those patches. So anyone on the call from this area will know that these are they're the bigger players in terms of social housing providers, and it has been something that we've tried to look at when the government recently did a request for more funding bids to see if we could encourage some smaller housing providers to come under our umbrella and try and move them on, but we couldn't manage to get to our minimum figure of 100 properties this time around. But that's not to say we can't try again in the future. On we go, Helen, thanks. So wanted to talk about on here the mix of measures, first of all. So top left there, if you look at the lower end of the take up first, underfloor insulation right down at the bottom, that had a really poor take up, mainly because of the disruption that it causes in properties and residents. It was proposed by a number of the RPs, but they met with such don't know what, I'm just trying to think of the right word to say here. Just that when residents were talked through what this would involve, which is basically cutting a hole in the ground big enough in the ground floor of your property, either big enough for a person to get in, or there's something else called a Q-bot, which is this little robot that can go down and do it. Very, very few people wanted to take it up. So a lot of I think all of the housing associations who had proposed that ended up swapping to other measures. The next two above that, the shared ground loops and the GSHP ground source heat pumps, were delivered by just one housing association for a small block of flats, and they found it really expensive, really disruptive, mainly outside the property, because you have to dig huge holes to install the equipment that goes with this. But on the plus side, the tenants in those blocks are delighted, and it's really a really efficient, beneficial measure. But funnily enough, that housing association has said to us directly that they just wouldn't consider doing it again. It was so expensive. It had lots of knock-on expenses in terms of cleaning the property because it made such a mess outside. I think it's taken a long time for the open space outside to right itself. And I think those tenants have been really lucky to benefit from it, I think. So I think, is it back up to the top? I can't see now. The loft insulation. So there's one that's a universal, fairly cheap, relatively cheap measure that pretty much all properties can benefit from. Perhaps not flats in the middle of blocks, but other than that, very universal, and one that is brings benefits without a huge amount of disruption, as long as, of course, you haven't got a loft full of stuff that you'd have to take out. And then the one that we had the most conversations about, both pros and cons, was the EWI and IWI, the external wall insulation and the internal wall insulation. And that suits different house types. So it might be that you'd end up having both measures, and depending where your property was in our city region, some of the local authorities had very restrictive planning requirements, and they would ask for individual applications against each individual property, which is a really high cost and effort for a housing association that might be looking at streets and streets of terraced properties. But where that did happen, the response could be to do an internal wall insulation on the fronting the street, so that all the facades look the same, and then have external wall insulation at the back, where it doesn't matter if you have some people who opt in or out, and you're not trying to keep that uniform look. But just to hit on then that the total amount of measures there is just over 4,000 measures against our 1,200 properties. So each property is taken 2, 3, 4 measures to get it sufficiently up to the C EPC band. So very rarely was it just one quick hit. It was a consistent effort, considerable effort, I should say. The boxes there are just some good news headlines from our programme. We didn't hand any money back to central government, which was our absolute #1 priority. We managed to put some RP staff on a retrofit boot camp with the grant, because we got some resource money as part of this overall allocation of money. And in the middle there in the green, we developed a cost benchmarking tool, which might be something we could touch on or share with groups listening today, that we commissioned Turner and Townsend, who are a big consultancy firm, to produce this tool that would allow housing associations or local authorities, anybody we want to share it with, to be able to program a mix of measures, or at least plug them into this glorified Excel document that would allow you to pick and choose the measures that you might use in your property and have some idea, a gauge of what it could cost. And it's benchmarked, in our case, for the Liverpool City region, but that it has some national data in it as well.
This is a park of the state. So what we've been doing is looking at external wall insulation, really quite thick insulation that's put on the external of all the units, with some ventilation as well, so you don't get condensation and so on. But obviously that is very kind of carefully put in alongside the insulation. The benefits the residents will see from this are pretty wide ranging actually. With that additional insulation, then they will be able to heat their homes, and it will retain that heat. So actually they need to use less. And this is really important, obviously, in the current climate, you know, with the cost of living crisis. So anything that we can do to reduce that is really beneficial.
The feedback from customers has been absolutely amazing. Everyone's really happy with the work that we've done. They've noticed a difference with the warmth already, even if being the warmer months. They're a little bit elderly, so they do have the heating on still of an evening. They've not been putting the heating on because the heat is retained through the daytime. They've also mentioned that, you know, the noise as well. Some of them live quite close to the motorway. It's shutting the noise out, and also the ventilation that we've also fitted under the PAS regulations has improved the condensation when they're in the shower and when they're cooking.
I think this is going to make a big difference, this rendering, because it's cut the sound out, so it's certainly going to hold the heat in. There's another 3 inches of cladding on there, so that's certainly going to make a big difference. And as you can see yourself, it's come out really, really well, and I love it.
Thanks, Helen. I'll let you roll into the next one when you can.
Right.
The next one is about an air source heat pump. So again, it wasn't from Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. It was from HUG, which is a funding stream that was for off-gas properties in particular. But it was just hopefully useful just to see what a heat pump might involve and look like.
So the combined authority has got targets to achieve net zero, but also to tackle fuel poverty. And as part of that process, when we can, we acquire grants from government funding to support our community and roll that out to the most vulnerable households in the city region. So the Sustainable Warmth Fund, which is the scheme that we're looking at today, we've been able to acquire about £30 million worth of capital funding to spend in people's houses, and that's probably going to be spread across about 2,500 to 3,000 properties. The particular element of this is called the Home Upgrade Grant, which is just for properties that are off the gas network. Where people have got expensive heating systems such as oil and LPG, the installation of air source heat pump will lead to an energy cost saving. So an air source heat pump, you set the temperatures in the property and it keeps the property at those temperatures, as opposed to you just turn the heating on when you need it.
Today we are at a property in Blundell where we have installed an air source heat pump. The customer used to get deliveries of gas, LPG, that will all stop, obviously not dependent on external deliveries.
and we had to wait in for gas bottles to come, and we had to order it. I think when we had that hard winter, you know, a few years ago, 2 bottles lasted us 3 weeks. And at the moment now, I think they're about 70 quid a bottle. It's cleaner as well. You know, it's just a different house. I wouldn't entertain gas after that. Yeah, and considering we got it for nothing, you know, you can't complain at that, can you?
Mr and Mrs Goldborn had theirs installed last August, so they have been through a winter with the system and are enjoying the benefits.
The Combined Authority has recently issued its net zero plan for the next 5 years. This is part of the rollout, and we will be endeavouring to do a lot more of this type of work in the future. We will basically get whatever funding we can from the government, and we're very active in trying to source that and make sure that our residents access as much funding as possible to help with this.
So just a final slide from me here too, and it was to just hit some of the big lessons learned that we've discussed with our registered providers. That first one, they're talking about pre-delivery assessments. That's mainly to say that we really could have done with our partners having more information on their stock. And quite often we found that it was either outdated or just plain wrong. And I think that's because it was such a rush to get the original bid together. You know, central government set the time frame that we had to get our bid together for these 8 different housing associations. And they had to, at some point, make an estimate where they didn't know for sure. And of course, when they had their retrofit assessments done and they found that perhaps that archetype house that they thought was this EPC or would benefit most from these measures wasn't quite the case. And so the takeaway that the RPs have taken is that it's never a waste to do a retrofit assessment. And I think, if anything, we'll feed back to central government that the funding for that alone would be a benefit, and it would help housing associations have a better idea of their stock. I've touched on a couple of these measures already. I'd say the consortium approach there, right in the middle, the very best thing about that was that if, as I've said, housing associations had to change their measure mix or indeed take properties out because the costs went up and they could no longer support their portion, their co-funding, it meant that we didn't have to send the money back to central government. We kept it in our consortium and we could reallocate it to any of the other partners who did have momentum and did have their delivery contractors in place and were able to spend it. So that was a really big benefit of working together. This question, well, Paul touched on earlier how collaborative were people, the housing associations, and they were very collaborative because there was so much to be gained from sharing the lessons learned or lessons about the measures and which combinations of measures worked well together or didn't. Or, there was an outstanding one about, not outstanding, just a very substantial one that those housing associations who were able to invest in some kind of tenant liaison person reaped the benefits. They were able to really engage with residents to explain fully what was being proposed and to get them on board and have fewer people worried or concerned or, just not able to take up the offer. And that comes down actually to the last point there, where some housing associations were able to use a void property as a show property. And it meant that they could take residents round and show them what internal wall insulation looked like, and people could truly reflect then that what is the outcome of having this insulation put inside your property? Is it going to feel like a big difference or not so big, or are the benefits going to totally outweigh? I'm conscious my time is cracking on, so I just wanted to say down at the bottom, this was just to say that we're moving on now and underway with wave 2.1 of SHDF, which is bigger still than this one. So that's 14 housing associations this time. aiming to do over 4,000 homes. And we're really keen to undertake wave 3, which is hopefully on the horizon, but again, will come with specified timeframes for the bid. And these are the types of things that, not to get too political, we're trying to argue should be devolved to our area so that we can manage this in the best way for the city region in Liverpool. And that's me for now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. And I think in light of this afternoon's discussion about the kind of consortium approach, I think what is most exciting for me is that wave 2 is really growing from the example of wave 1. And I think one of the questions that will come up is about, is this happening in other areas? And we know other combined authority mayors and other consortiums
are
looking at this. So really, really brilliant to hear that. Really exciting.
From a tenant's point of view, there are only recently some very good projects going on. And as was said by the previous speaker, landlords are starting to collaborate, which is good. But there was one point in the questions about small landlords. They seem to be being left behind. I'd like to see smaller landlords, those with round about 1,000 homes, being taken under the wing of the larger landlords, especially when it comes to retrofitting, because I'm sure Anna would agree, to put in a bid for SHDF costs a lot of money to actually just do the bid. The larger landlords can afford, especially when they collaborate together, they can afford to hire external professionals to do the bidding for them, to do all the paperwork, red tape, and all the rest of it. The smaller landlords can't. They don't have the money. They don't have the personnel. They don't have the expertise. So I'd like to see the smaller landlords taken under the wing of, some of these larger ones. For me, as I say, there are a lot of good projects going on and there's a lot of good work going on, but for me, it's too slow. Between 2013 and 2022, there were 2.6 million homes that have been retrofitted. And last year, there were, it's estimated 113,000 social homes, socially rented homes done. If we keep that pace, it's going to be another 40 years before we're done. But 2050 is only 26 years away. We need to speed up and we need to involve tenants more. At the Unlock Net Zero Homes exhibition last year, there were 8,000 people registered to go to that exhibition. Only 40 were registered as tenants. Now, to me, that is not very good. That is absolutely disgusting. It's our homes that are being retrofitted. Why can't landlords hire a minibus for a day and take up half a dozen or so of their involved tenants so they can talk to the experts? Find out, they can talk to other tenants, find out what's going on in different areas, because tenants need to get as much information as they can to get on board, to agree to have the works done. But at the moment, the only information they're getting is either at the time they are going to have their home retrofitted, or they're listening to the negative media, or they're listening to friends of friends of friends of friends of friends, and they're getting horrendous myths coming out. But there is nobody counteracting those myths. Speak to your landlords. See if you can get a retrofit panel of tenants made, created within your organisation. Start talking to the landlord. Try and spread the word. because if tenants don't get on board, the landlords are not going to get the work done. Now, the other thing is that there is a dramatic skill shortage in this country. Estimates are anything up to 500,000 skilled workers are going to be needed in the next 10 years. But again, where are they going to come from? There is no funding for it. There's hardly any funding for it. Last year, Michael Gove gave back to the government £1.9 billion. Why weren't centres set up to train heat pump installers, assessors, surveyors, planners, and everything else that's needed to retrofit properties? These are the things that tenants can do something about. Your voice is important. It is, and it will be heard. The regulator has said landlords have got to start listening to their tenants. We tenants are the power in social housing now, not the landlords. They have got to listen to us. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of asking a tough question. So long as it's relevant, it will be listened to, and hopefully it will be answered. But we've all got to work together, both sides of the fence, landlords and tenants. There are plenty of good stories out there that nobody gets to hear, but there are few negative stories out there that everybody hears or reads and everybody listens to. We need to go the opposite way and start getting the positives out along with the bad. Nothing's going to be 100% perfect every single time. But so long as the landlords learn from it, and so long as they change their practices or procedures or whatever, and show that they have learned from their mistakes, then we can't fault them for it. We should applaud them. But they have to be transparent and open and honest. But I applaud the good works that are going on. But please start telling us, the tenants. Don't keep it to yourselves.
Okay, Steve, thank you very much. I think it's interesting, just one little anecdote from here in Liverpool, actually. A community land trust that I've kind of done some work with over the years has recently got some funding in the Anfield area of Liverpool to actually do information sharing with the community around what retrofitting means and what it could look like, particularly for old terrace properties as they are in Anfield. So I think what's quite interesting about that angle is that it's the community group themselves that have secured the funding to upskill or share information with the community. Paul's got back. Great, Paul. We had a panic there, but it's good to see you. So we're going to ask Paul to do his presentation. I think Helen's going to share the screen again as well.
Just a quick intro from me. My name's Paul Parsons, and I'm a committee member for the Dartford Tenants and Leaseholders Forum. I've just recently taken up the vice chair post. And on this presentation, you'll notice on the first slide, it's presented by Lee Gilbert. Lee's the authority's housing maintenance manager, and he's given me permission to share some of these slides, and I've added bits and pieces to it. Unfortunately, I can't share this with you afterwards, but if there's any links in there after, if you get back to Helen, then we can share that for you. So if I could have the first slide, please, Helen. Basically, this table is the housing stock, an overview of Dartford stock. So we have approximately 4,239 properties, and it's predominantly a mixture of houses, flats, with some bungalows, and also DBC own and manage a park home. As I said, the current stock's about 4,239, but this is changing as we do have some current ongoing new build programs and possible purchase of further stock. If I could have the next slide, please, Helen. This is the overview of the property age. So this slide demonstrates the age of the DBC stock, and you'll see that over 1,800 of our homes were built between 1950 and 1966. This was during the post-war boom. The table also demonstrates the growth of the stock through our new build programme. This was recently up until the end of last year, with 97 properties that we've constructed since 2012. Please bear in mind, though, that this data is changing, and we do have currently further new build programmes commencing and the potential of other housing projects. Next slide, please, Helen. An overview of our wall construction type. So traditional solid wall and solid brick homes evolved in the 1930s, 40s with the introduction of cavity wall construction. But you'll see from this pie chart that the DBC predominantly have cavity wall homes, but with a large number of solid brick homes. The cavity wall homes provided greater energy efficiency, locking in the warmth of the home, but the early solid brick homes can suffer from increased heat loss, making them less efficient. Next slide, please, Helen. So basically an overview of our main heating type. As you can see, gas boilers and central heating equate to over 98% of our main heating types. More recently, where practical, some new build homes have been installed with an air source heat pump. And after conversations that I've had recently with our head of housing services and our head of housing maintenance, it seems, in my opinion, that my landlord wishes to continue with the installations of air source heat pumps. These have been installed in the recent new build programmes, and they certainly work well. And the beauty of this is we've actually received the last new build that went up's been in circulation for about 2 years, and we've received absolutely no complaints from any of our tenants over this new system. Next slide, please. So how do we measure our performance? So EPCs are the energy survey, and it shows you the efficiency. So an EPC will give your home an energy rating from A, very efficient, to G, inefficient. And this certificate is usually valid for about 10 years. An EPC is required for all properties at void stage prior to occupation. Next slide, please, Helen. So how do we measure our performance? So earlier this year, my landlord introduced Parity Portfolio software. This software can basically blend the EPC data with our own stock condition survey data, such as new roofs, boilers, doors, and windows. And we've basically rolled this out and introduced this modelling software that will help our landlord calculate the amount of carbon our homes are using to provide power and heating. So our objectives and targets. So obviously the government, as we all know, has set the target for all social housing providers to attain a minimum EPC certificate of C for rented properties by 2030, and for all homes to be net zero carbon by 2050. The scale of this challenge is immense, and basically more of the information that will coincide with what we've been doing will coincide on the next few slides. So if I could have the next slide, please, Helen. So our current performance, I think you'll have to just click that there's bullet points on these ones. So I think you'll just have to, if you click the space bar, Helen, it should come up with where we are. So as you can see, over the stock of 4,239 properties, this demonstrates the energy performance of our stock. So you'll see that 3,547 of our properties already meet or exceed the 2030 target set by the government, which is fantastic. But it leaves around 700 properties that require further measures to improve performance. So these measures range from, after surveys, increased loft insulation, A-rated windows, external wall insulation, or improved heating. You will note that on the far left of the slide, unfortunately, we have about 9 properties that hit G and F, which is insufficient. We are looking to improve these properties. I think the F-rated property was actually built initially in 1830, and unfortunately, the tenants within this property has actually refused any recommendations for us to make any improvements, but that is ongoing. So, as I mentioned earlier, that any new Dartford property, new build initiative, will meet the guidelines prior to properties being occupied, and any potential void or existing properties obtained will have these guidelines up to standard where possible. Next slide, please, Helen. So the current performance and how we match countrywide. So England and Wales both have a median energy efficiency rating in Band D with scores of 67 and 65 respectively. Our median rating is 72.24. So as mentioned here, it also shows that social rented homes compared to the most efficient tenure with private rents and homeowners performing lower, but obviously all of these will be brought up to the same standard. So on the next slide, just sort of celebrating some of our achievements. So what we've sort of done, this is over sort of like since 2001, but ongoing with the new financial year. So we spent over 15 million on over 2,000 new roofs with increased loft insulation, approximately 15 million over 3,800 of our properties having A-rated boilers, 5 million retrospective loft and cavity wall insulation to hundreds of homes. We fitted EWI into 480 of our properties, approximately 10.5 million. And we've commenced the installation of air source heat pumps. And we fitted photovoltaic systems to approximately 200 of our homes and battery storage to 10 homes. As I said, this original presentation was presented to our residents at our recent AGM back in October. So since a lot of this is currently always being updated, and especially with the financial year, we do have more rollout budgets to improve the EPC and energy efficiency further. Next slide, please, Helen. So this is some pictures of some examples of one of the wards in our borough where we've rolled out the external wall insulation, which is suitable for solid wall and brick homes. Tenants, so we always try to include our tenants in any choices of rollouts. So EWI is no different, where they have a choice of colour. And we have a proven track record to reduce the energy, therefore reducing the energy bills. Next slide, please, Helen. And that's just another couple of pictures of work that's being carried out on EWI. So what's next? So as part of our ongoing improvements, we have commenced a programme of window replacements. This is currently, certainly in the area that I am in, this is being rolled out across most of our properties to bring the windows up to standard. We're also reviewing the quality and performance of cavity wall insulation and looking at the further programme of EWI. Roof replacements have continued, and that rollout is still going on, and that will continue into the next financial year. And we're scoping properties for further installations of the air source heat pumps and modelling our journey to EPC 2030 and net zero carbon 2050. And we do get a lot of questions asked from our residents on, obviously, in the current climate, how we can actually save more money on reducing energy bills. One thing we are doing further, the new financial year budgets have been released, so we're looking at another 145 properties on our stock to make some of these improvements, especially around energy, roofing, windows, and they have invested more money, significant amounts, to actually get these improvements rolled out. It's a snapshot of everything that my landlord's doing to help our residents with EPC and energy efficiency. Thank you.
Paul. Brilliant. Thank you. And it's great, I think, to have a local authority perspective in this as well, and tenants and leaseholders from a local authority perspective. So that's fantastic. Thank you very much for our speakers. That was great. Again, these sessions could go on much longer because you're just starting to tease out some of the real issues and the real questions that people have. But do keep sharing them with us, and we will feed back some information from them.